quarter of this meeting of the Finance Committee. Is there any public comment on tonight's agenda?
Going on this time.
All right, seeing none, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Good evening, everybody. On the agenda, we have 4 items listed here tonight. The first item on the agenda is going to be of a housekeeping nature in connection with PDE and the Colonial School District fund balance. If the committee recalls, every year we need to measure the amount of fund or amount of balance we have in our general fund unassigned balance. PDE stipulates that you cannot have more than 8% in your unassigned fund balance. The committee recalls last year that this was a part of the board action that we used to move $5.75 million over to our CES renovation. And as it stands right now, we are about 8.21% over budget, 8.21% of our general fund unassigned balance. And we'll take a look at this brief demonstration or brief presentation. You can see as of June of 2024, that's the measurement date up here, our unassigned fund balance is $12,980,200, and which then brings a cumulative general fund total balance of about $27.8 million. PDE rules stipulate that just the unassigned fund balance cannot be greater than 8%. We are allowed to allocate those funds to capital projects, to restricted accounts, to committed or assigned balances. Having said that, it is the recommendation of the administration tonight to transfer $326,250 out of the general fund, which will bring us below our minimum required threshold, and to put it in the assigned fund balance within the general fund. That will allow us to mitigate future increases in tax increases that we may feel uncomfortable putting upon our school district. That will bring our assigned balance from $4 million to about $4.3 million. And like I said, that will allow us to use some of that money to mitigate some increase in taxes in future years. Again, this is an annual practice that has to get done. It gets done after the audit. Audit usually gets issued in November. With the December, off schedule, January is when we look to do this. Any questions about this action? No? Okay, that'll then move over to the agenda item for the meeting next week for the school business board. Next item on the list is more just like an FYI. Currently, Colonial School District engages with Dominic Kosher. He's a CPA down in Conshohocken Borough. He is an appointed or unelected official within Conshohocken, and as such, Colonial School District needs to pass a resolution every 4 years to align ourselves with him because he is, essentially an appointed official. His contract ends June 30th, 2025 of this year. His contract is $6,500 per year. This is just more of a FYI that I'll be negotiating with him over the next 2 weeks to get a resolution together for the board to pass next week in terms of what his compensation would look like going forward. Since I've been here, he has been the Conshohocken appointed borough. It's not that we have an option, we just have an option in terms of what his compensation looks like. So over the next 2 weeks, I'll work with him on that, and then we'll have that as a resolution for next week's board meeting. To Dom's credit, very diligent, very detailed. I'm sorry?
Were we on Thursday? Yeah.
Yes, this Thursday. Exactly what I meant. Thank you. Thank you. Yep, I will be there. So I threw you off. But long story short, yes, that will be a resolution that was presented to this week's school board meeting. Any questions on that?
Do you anticipate a large change?
His last change on the last contract was $100.
No.
I anticipate that or less. Yeah. Next item on the agenda is informational items. This is the December 2024, 2023 comparison. Just get this going. Again, overall revenues come in at about 81.3% of overall budget, $128,588,000, compared to prior year 81.21% on $122 million. What we're seeing this year is due to a couple of material transactions in terms of the real estate market. Transfer taxes are much higher this year at this point compared to prior year. There were 2 very material transactions. If you can see on this schedule, transfer taxes, as listed as the 5th item on there, is about $2.1 million. This time last year, we were $825,000. This is I don't want to say it's an unknown line item, but with rates coming down, things opening up in the commercial market, this is just a change of pace in terms of what we're seeing, last year with rates in the 7, 8, or even higher percent. In terms of local revenue, like I said, 90.47% compared to prior years, 90.87%. We just did have a material transaction hit the bank today. About $700,000 came in a local real estate tax revenue. So all things considered, we should be able to hit that local number by the time we end up this fiscal year. State revenue is very consistent at 37.59%. And federal revenue does look a little skewed because it was the wrap up of the remaining COVID money. As the committee recalls, September 30th was the last day to obligate the funds, not necessarily pay them out, but to obligate them, make sure we're under contract. And we did spend the remaining of the COVID federal money. So that was just a close out of those federal dollars. Obviously, on the corresponding on the other side of it, we're at about 40.46% of total expenses compared to 40.01% of total expenses compared to budget of the prior year. Very favorable. Not much had really happened in November and December outside of special education settlements, due process hearings, which the committee and the school board is aware during our school board business meetings. Happy to report again that the Chromebook repairs, we're seeing a decrease in expenses due to our investment in not just the warranty, but then also the cases and the covers. So we're glad to see that budget line item not feel as much stress as last year. And then overall, like I said, we're at 50.23% of excess revenues over expenses. We're trending very favorable to last year. Obviously, we are being helped out by that transfer tax revenue. Correspondingly, on the other side, the interest income is down, as noted on this slide, down to about $350,000. We always try to stay aggressive with our financial depositories. However, everybody's just pulling back rates. We're down about half a point, maybe a little bit more than that compared to prior year. We're somewhere in the low to mid fours. When last year we were in the low to, we're right about like 5.2%. But as everybody sees, the Fed cut rate this last meeting, as well as going forward. Amusement taxes, very consistent with prior year, and then as well as when we look at our Act 1 earned income taxes, very consistent at 8%. When we look at wages and benefits, very consistent in terms of in alignment with our contractual obligations. Professional services still feeling the effects of special education, mandated services, one-to-one aids, but those are dollars that we were always monitoring as well as budgeting for. And like I said, overall, we're seeing about a 5% increase in expenses, however, on track with budgeting. Our expenses by function, when we look at December, happy to report our instructional is at 59.8% compared to this time prior year, 57.3%. If I had to put a measurement to how this year is trending, I think it's going to be very favorable compared to prior year. Like I said, while interest income is decreasing, we still have, somewhere between 4.5% earning on that money, and the transfer tax is steady. Real estate money has been collected at a very high collection rate. So in terms of right now where we are as a 24, 23, 24, 25, very favorable and on par with where we're looking at in terms of budget. Any questions with current?
Yeah, quick question on the transfer taxes. What I might be missing here. Do you know what the budget was for that?
I'm gonna say it's $3 million.
I'm sorry, how much?
$3 million, I believe. And we'll get in more into detail in terms of historical figures as well as projections when we get into the next part of the agenda, when we look at 25-26 budget.
Yeah, I just didn't know if that 1.3 million would carry the budget. I guess we don't know yet.
We're projected to be over budget. What we do is that we look at trend analysis for transfer taxes compared to what we've collected so far, and then I look at prior year, what the average collection was by month. We're on trend to exceed budget in terms of transfer taxes, solely because of those two material transactions.
Is that good in the springtime with more movement, or
No. I have a couple commercial real estate brokers that I know. Sometimes there's a lot of run up towards the end of the year because they want to get the deals done going into the calendar year, or sometimes it's right before the beginning of the year, or I'm sorry, right after the beginning of the year, just in order to try to get that full year, calendar year of activity. Obviously, it's all contingent on rates and when they can lock in themselves. But not necessarily from a macro perspective, obviously lower rates, more transactions, more transfers. But correspondingly, lower rates help us from a transfer tax standpoint, but they hurt us in our investment yield.
Yeah.
So, flip side of the coin. Okay. So there's no more questions on that. We can move to the final part of the presentation. Okay. So tonight represents the first look at the 25-26 budget presentation. Again, I want to reiterate that this is the first budget look. We will have three more budget presentations, at which point then we will look at adopting a proposed final budget in April. That budget will sit through May and June, at which point we will have a final budget adoption. There is leeway between the adopted proposed budget in April and June, but we feel as administration, once we get to April, the numbers are pretty solid. Same exercise as last year. We'll have multiple finance committee meetings. We'll go over a baseline, which essentially is tonight, and then any changes as we progress through the next 3 months. But like I said, and you can refer to this schedule going forward. Tonight's budget presentation number 1, followed up by February, March, and April's additional budget presentations, and then the ultimate adoption in June. I'd like to start off with what we can operate within, what we're operating with as it stands right now, and then what we're looking at going forward. So as the board sees, base 1 ACT index was set at 4%. The committee recalls, the board recalls, we opted out of the ACT 1 index or the ACT 1 process. We are not allowed to exceed 4%. Based off the initial measurement, we were at 3.85%, which we felt comfortable that we would not exceed 4%. So we are now mandated to stay below 4% for any budget that we decide to pass. Factors we're looking at considering for 25-26. Obviously, local revenues, which represent almost 80% of our overall revenues, we want to make sure we're mindful of our assessed values. Right now, our assessed values are very flat when comparable to prior years. We'll get into that further in a minute. Earned income taxes. This was a number that we really looked at the last 2 years. If the committee recalls, we took a much larger increase from a budget perspective last year to the tune of about $500,000 in increased budget. I'm happy to report we do expect that to come to fruition this year. But now we're also looking at the 25-26. And what dollars can we harness out of that line item in terms of budget support? State revenues are always going to be a question in terms of what Governor Shapiro is going to make available to us for basic and special education, as well as some other programs. And the one line item that's working as a detriment to us, as well as other school districts, not just in Pennsylvania, but also the country, is the federal COVID grants, which are no longer applicable going forward. Correspondingly, on the other side of the ledger, we have our contractual obligations to salaries and benefits. We have an enrollment, which we are constantly monitoring, as well as also making sure we're supporting with resources. Those resources are not just pens and paper and books, but also staff. Tonight's budget includes the potential hiring of 4 professional staff. It's a placeholder in the budget. It's when we look at enrollment projections and the number of bodies we may need, we're looking at 4 additional bodies. This does not account for moving bodies from elementary to CES or amongst the district, but this is actual new dollars in there, as well as the benefits associated with that. We will be mindful going forward of any pending retirements, which we can salvage some savings. While we don't like to see them go, however, they are higher up on the matrix in the scale than a potential new teacher. State mandated employer retirement. The committee recalls a couple years ago it was about 34.2% of every dollar, and we were happy to see that it trended down to 33.9% for the 24-25 budget. However, the state recently certified that it is now going back up to 34%. So 34 cents on every dollar of every salary that we spend, we are now mandated to pay into pieces. It's an increase, albeit 1/10 of a point. However, it is an increase. First, healthcare. First look with our consortium. First look came in at about 7% on a weighted average between healthcare and prescription. We'll get the second look in February, then the third look sometime in March or April. But we also look at historical trends, what that is. But right now, that is what we're working with in terms of our first look at 7%. We do have 3 line items in terms of investment in new programs, investment in new initiatives within this budget. They correlate to technology, safety and security equipment, and Act 191, which is our volunteer firefighter and EMS rebate program. These are three items that we'll talk about at length throughout this process, but these are new dollars and programs initiatives in tonight's budget. Okay, so just to give the committee an idea. No, I apologize. Okay.
So the enrollment, the third grade class
Yes,
is still
sir.
that largest class. And that's why we're obviously going through the renovation. So that extra 120 kids, 100 to 150, 160 kids over the next 2 years is the main catalyst for the increased staffing. We are starting kindergarten enrollment for next year shortly. So a lot of the combination of potential new positions versus potentially moving folks, transferring people into CES. That's how we came up with the 4 positions in the budget. Because it's not just classroom teachers, you have to remember kids have specials, so they go to music, so if you keep adding a classroom teacher, there's a formula for what you need for art, music, other specials, special education services. So could it be 3, could it be 5? Yes, but just from a budget standpoint at this point, not knowing the exact enrollment, that kind of goes into the rationale for it.
At what point do you think we need to start discussions about expanding within the building or anything like
I'm hoping we do not.
that? Okay.
I think if we get, so the current kindergarten is not as big as the previous 3. If we ramp back up to the size of the current 3rd and 2nd grades, in 2 years, we'll need to start having that discussion.
Okay.
If it's bigger than that, in 1 year, we're gonna need to start having that discussion. But if we maintain the current size of the current kindergarten, I believe the renovations we're doing at CES the district will be in great shape, grades 4 through 12. So I have to keep an eye on K-3, but I think we have some ideas that do not include a new building. If we maintain the current size of, if we get 400, we can handle it. If we get 450, that's gonna grow to 550, 600, then we're gonna need a bigger building.
What's the current kindergarten?
410,
And 3rd grade is,
5.
oh, they're not even close.
Oh no, it's the biggest group. It's 550, 560. It's a big class.
We're not doing the R word, are we?
No, because to do that, you would actually have to have space in a building to do that. We don't have a building with 7 empty rooms, right? So we can't. We would just be shuffling the chairs, right? No, I've lived through that. Not looking to do that again.
First COVID, kids, I guess, are coming through.
The ones who get, the ones 3rd grade, but then go to kindergarten.
No, they were probably more like the kindergarten first. Yeah, they're coming in.
Okay,
So,
No, this was
but our
just
3rd grade wasn't those the kids that started kindergarten?
they were, but I think Jeremy was referring to kids.
Oh,
before
okay.
COVID.
yeah,
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, a lot of parents chose not to send their kids to people's ideas.
That's true.
Yes.
Yeah. Third's is big.
Yeah.
And second's big too. I mean, there'll be over 1,000 kids in CES
I think there's somebody in
for 2 grades. And last year they were 808.
Proposed real estate development there. Is there more residential or commercial coming online?
So I have a meeting at the end of this month with each of the township borough managers. I was recently made aware that the large office building behind the mall, one of those empty office towers, did get conditional approval on 149 mixed-use apartment buildings. I mean, that's years down the road, but a part of the budget process, it will be me meeting with the borough managers over the next month or so to look at,
More
new
apartments
developments coming online.
Country than anything else.
Yeah.
But that was based on that. We haven't had this year's. We go around and meet with everybody. Based on last year's, the biggest ones were coming in were in Conchi, the big apartment complexes with 500 units.
down the line.
that have various marketing strategies attached to them. And I think that's a result of Amerisource.
So just again, to give the board or the committee a refresher, where we stand in terms of the general fund, 27.8 million. The unassigned to that is about 12.9. Now, this is pre-approval of that transfer, and we're working with $4 million in assigned balance. Again, that $4 million is what allows the school district administration to help balance any increase in taxes that the board would like us to help mitigate. As we move over to the first side of the ledger, revenues. Revenues for the 25-26 budget are expected to be $129,546,827. This is approximately $1.4 million increase year over year, or about 1.1%. State revenues, we like to project state revenues based off of actual dollars received. So when we do state subsidies, we know exactly what we're looking at getting. As we work through the process with the Commonwealth, as those budget numbers start to roll out of Governor Shapiro's office, we can update those and we'll go from there. But for planning purposes and budget purposes, I budget based off of actual dollars received because I don't want to count my chickens before they hatch. Federal dollars, you can see, is the largest impact here at $1 million less than prior year budget, due again to that COVID money. We're looking at an increase of $1,088,088 or 0.69%. These are budgeted dollars right now, and the basis for these numbers come off of our local. You can see that current real estate taxes just alone make up almost 81%. Our earned income taxes make up about another 9.6. So 90.6% of our overall revenues come from just these two line items. The earned income taxes, you'll see it had a increased budget from $12,075,000 to $12,500,000. It's a 425% increase, 3.52%. I know that does seem like a large increase, and if you look at it from a 2-year perspective, it is larger than the prior year's budget numbers. However, from everything that we're looking at that's coming out of Berkheimer, who is our payroll tax collection agency, it is a strong number. I do feel confident in that number. I do believe we will hit not just this year's budget, but also next year's proposed budget at that $12.5 million. Now, the other side of the other line item here that is material is our current real estate taxes. The board's aware current real estate taxes are an indication of the current assessed value multiplied by our tax rate. Assessment values are up. They are not up as far or as high as I would obviously like them, but they are up to the tune which generates our $686,000 in revenue. The pilot agreement. There was a pilot agreement that expired this past year, if the committee recalls, essentially moving that real estate dollars out of the pilot agreement and just into current real estate tax line items. So if you think of it from a net perspective, real estate taxes are really only up right now about $472,000. This number will change every month. We get our assessment reports from the county, and that will change. Today being the 13th, we did not receive the calendar year January 1 number, but that will be reflected in next month's budget. Amusement taxes, IDEA, and receipts from other LEAs are also represented being increases off of prior year. Amusement taxes, we look at businesses in the area that are remitting current amusement taxes. We have been in the process over the last few months of going at, of doing our due diligence on businesses within the area to make sure that they are paying their fair share of amusement taxes. Again, I feel that that is a strong number at $490,000. While it is a 63% increase, there are certain businesses that are coming online with amusement taxes that are now starting to remit this year as well as will in the next year. So I do believe that's a strong number as well. IDEA, that is a special education program, that is a grant agreement. Those numbers are very accurately tracked, and I believe $75,000 increase is warranted there. Receipts from other LEAs. As the committee is aware, a lot of our students that are in our district are placed with other school districts or placed with other specialized education centers. We then are able to back bill for those services. It's contingent on what we pay out. So that's more of a revenue neutral line item, but it's more accurately reflecting how much we're going to bill out compared to how much we're going to also spend. it's a net effect of 0, but again, I just want to make sure we're accurately portraying that number. So local local taxes up about $1.4 million or 1.1% in 25-26 budget. Again, this kind of just shows you where we are in assessed values. You can see that in going from 2016 all the way through to almost 2023, a large uptick in assessed values. This is due to just a lot of developers coming in the area, building the housing developments in the neighborhoods that they're building, as well as the commercial, Amerisource Burgess, the condominiums and the apartments along the river. But now we're starting to flatten out. This is similar to what happened in 2008 when the World Economic Crisis happened due to the security-backed mortgages, where there was a little bit of a reset, and a little bit of a flattening, and then a little bit of an uptick. We will continue to monitor these numbers, but just kind of make sure we're seeding expectations that we're not going to be increasing to 3, 4, or even high 4% increases that we've seen over the last few years. These are numbers and these are data that come from the county, but we do audit them and go through them with any changes. Transfer taxes and delinquent taxes. To Mr. Schwartz's point, we look at transfer taxes, and you can see that transfer taxes budget was about $3,093,000 for 24-25. It is a little conservative to be at that $3 million number, especially considering what we're seeing with the last 2 material transactions. However, if we budget for large material turnover in apartments every year, we know that's not going to happen. The apartments down in Conshohocken are not going to turn over every year. Apartments in general, on a commercial basis, aren't going to turn over every year. Where that $3 million comes from is that I look at, you can see the last 11 years, I take out the highest number and I take out the lowest number, and then I try to look at a weighted average. So I think the $3 million is sufficient right now. We will continue to monitor transfer taxes this year as rates start to improve. Maybe from a commercial basis, we can look at that. But right now, we're looking at a $3 million budget standpoint from transfer taxes. Delinquent taxes, you can see during that 21-22 school year, during those COVID years, very high dollars, $3.8 million. Those are outliers. Those are dollars that I can't imagine that we're going to see again outside of the other factors going on in the world. So we're projecting a flat budget standpoint at $2 million in terms of delinquent taxes. Earned income taxes. Like I said, we saw for 23-24 about $12.2 million in actual earned income taxes collected. We hedged our bets a little in 24-25 at about $12,075,000. I'm taking a more aggressive standpoint to $12.5 million. This is from working with Berkheimer, looking over the data, looking over the employment records of people in our school district to come to that 12.5 number. I do believe it is solid, but again, this is a number that we will continue to monitor as well as everything else. State revenues, we briefly talked about those. Those are contingent on actual dollars spent or actual dollars received, but you can see that we're projecting about $748,000 increase in state revenues, about 2.73% increase. Again, we will continue to monitor that as we make our way through the budget process. Again, this is not to reiterate, but this is budget meeting number 1 of 4. Things will change, may or will change. Total federal funding, this gives you an idea, is what we experienced over the last 3 years, and then what we're looking at over into 25-26. $1.1 million in federal money expected for the 25-26 year compared to prior year, 2.2, 2 million, and $1.4 million. These are just realities that every school district has to face right now.
Mark, can you go back up to
Yep.
one more?
One more?
Yeah. Can you remind me, because for some reason I can't remember, I know something came out about the cyber charter tuition piece that last time. Can you just remind me what that shift was that came out in the fall?
Yep, so during the preparation of the 24-25 budget, there was no indication from the Commonwealth or Governor Shapiro that he would provide relief to school districts. After the budget was passed, which was after all the other school districts passed their budget, they came out with a 9% formula of all cyber charter school expenses that the state would kick a subsidy back to the school districts to help provide relief. We have not seen it yet. They're still making their way through the formula. We're projected $159,000. I shaved it down to $150,000. Now, while our cyber charter tuition revenues are pretty flat because Karen Burke and her team do such a good job of trying to keep our kids in our program, that $150,000, while it's not material, I just want to make sure there's a line item because I want to make sure we're tracking as well. But it's essentially subsidy relief from the state based off our expense. We don't get that unless we incur the expenses, but again, it's a very small percentage of what we actually spend.
Thank you for the response.
Okay, the flip side of the coin obviously is the expenditures. Overall expenditures projected for the 25-26 year are $1,663,458,992. This is a 3.34% increase over prior year, or approximately $5.2 million. There are multiple factors contributing to this $5.2 million. Obviously, there are contractually obligated salaries with our unions as well as our professional staff and other agreements. We have the associated benefits. Like I said, we're going from a 33.9 to a 34% increase in PSERS. While it seems like a tenth of a point, however, when you put that on almost $70 million worth of eligible salaries, you're looking at $700,000 right off the top that the state is now pushing down to the school districts. We do see an increase in professional services. Obviously, it's going to be associated with our special education services, as well as supplies and textbooks. That is one of the larger driving dollars that is a non-salary personnel. Like I said, it's $1.2 million. We'll get into detail on that. I do want to point out, if you look down at interest, object 800, and debt service, you can see that we net about a savings of $338,000. This is due to that refinancing that we went through, as well as then extending that to the following year. So we're going to see some relief in those two line items. We do an analysis with every department, every building. We go to every building and meet with the principals. We go over their budget. We go over their wants and their needs, as well as the departments. I meet with Mr. Lally, his facilities, as well as technology, as well as Mrs. Grigaitis to go over curriculum. We pour over every line item, and then I work with Dr. Christian and Mrs. Grigaitis to go over, the top side. What are the highlights? Where are the dollars being spent? What is the wishes, the wants, and the needs in each department? When we look at that $1.2 million increase, yes, it is made up of just increases in supplies and textbooks from a general nature due to increased enrollment, but there are three line items in there that consist of almost $740,000. One is the expansion of the Chromebook program that we have from a one-to-one basis for our first grades and kindergarten students. Right now, those two grade levels are operating off of iPads. iPads were purchased right around COVID. I think it was either right at the beginning or right before COVID, but they've run out their useful life. The recommendation from administration and from talking with the principals is to move those students to a Chromebook. That way they're familiar with the devices, so when they get into second and third grade, they already have use to the actual device. That is one of the line items here that is being recommended tonight. Another one is the interactive TV replacement at the elementary buildings. With CES getting the renovation and the 18 instructional rooms, come the interactive TVs. Historically, we have operated with projectors, but a lot of those projectors are also coming towards the end of their life. So we worked with Jill Forster, her team at CEA, as well as the technology department. They said, all right, with it now being 2025, what is the most advantageous piece of technology? Is it still a projector, or is it a touchscreen interactive TV? And the feedback we've gotten from the teachers is the TVs. So what we'd like to do is start with this 25-26 budget, is start replacing the projectors in CES with interactive TVs, and then those projectors become our inventory for other buildings. And then as we progress through the next 2, 3, or 4 years, we look to turn over projectors out of other buildings, backfill our inventory, but then give them interactive TVs. So essentially we're replacing our projectors with TVs, but then backfilling for any replacement needs. So that is to the tune of about $300,000. The additional line item on here that is weighing on that supplies line is a $40,000 investment in the expansion of zero-eyes security equipment and software at the elementary buildings. We currently do have software and cameras at the elementary buildings that have our zero-eyes capabilities. However, we'd like to expand it. We'd like to expand to hallways and other areas as identified by Mr. McDonald. It's about $20.91 per license, per lens, and there's 4 lenses in every camera. We did secure a grant of $199,000 from PCCD to offset some of these costs, but an additional $40,000 is being requested in this budget for the licenses. The $199,000 will cover just about all the equipment, so we're looking from just a license standpoint. And then the other one, from a new program or investment that is being proposed tonight as well, recommended for discussion, is the Act 91 Volunteer Firefighter and EMS Personnel Rebate Program. From a topside perspective, from speaking with the chiefs and Dr. Christian, it's approximately 132 volunteers. From speaking to the 2 other districts in the county, Lower Merion and Wissahickon, they said about 50% of their volunteers qualify for this program. We will get more into the eligibility requirements, but right now, with a rebate of $250, we're looking at a maximum investment in that of about $16,500. The $250 is up for discussion. Lower Merion's program is $1,500.
Wow.
Wissahickon is $500. I put a placeholder there for $250. It is up for discussion. If we were to go up to $500, obviously, that would go to $33,000. It doesn't move the needle in terms of the budget, but it does have an impact in terms of new programs. So these are 4 line items that the committee would wish to discuss with me tonight amongst yourselves as we go through this process. But these are the 4 things that we're looking to invest in.
I had a question. What's the reasonable expectation on the Chromebooks for the kindergarten and first grade? Are they? I mean, I'm not trying to get too into the weeds and get into how they're used exactly, but obviously, kindergartner, couple pound laptop might not be the best thing. So, are they staying in the school and are they touchscreen? Those are the 2 things that I would like to know.
So I don't want to
They are
speak on
touchscreen.
behalf of that, but they'll be touchscreen, and right now they would
Most
be
of the time
staying.
they stay in school.
Yeah, they'll stay in school.
Okay. Yeah.
But same robust case on there to protect it, same warranty program. Obviously, they will not be the size that a secondary student get because scale, but that'll be something that we'll make sure we work with the principals that all the features are there.
There's some benefit to, it's not perfect. The iPads are great for the little guys. I'm sure we've been talking to some of our teachers. Some of them like the ease of logging the kids in on the iPads versus the Chromebooks, but from a app perspective, it's a lot better for us to push things out on the Chromebooks. So it's not perfect, but good question. We consider both of those.
What's the cost difference between the projector system and the touch interactive TV?
About $700
More or less?
less.
700 or less for the TVs?
So we also, Mark met with Drew, and they put together a team of teachers and principals to kick the tires on the TVs because you have to remember too, if you go the TV route, the computer's built into that too. So that's a positive in less wires, things like that. On the other hand, if that goes, then a lot of things go, right? Like if the interactive whiteboard goes down, you still have your laptop and stuff, some other things. So we're having the teachers, because the dollars are absolutely important, we get it. But it also has to be, we don't want a space in the room that's not being used. And we don't want technology that's not being used. So if we get negative feedback from we have 5 or 6 champions trying it right now, who are some of our, strongest, not only strong teachers, but strong with technology and instruction. And if they'll give us the feedback before we move forward.
And with that, how much are we giving them extra professional development to switch when those teachers do switch? Because I'm looking at the teachers that are not comfortable with it, and there's nothing more frustrating than trying to do your lesson with this technology that you think isn't cooperating just because you're not comfortable with it.
That will be built into all this as well.
It's about 50-50 in the county right now. We've surveyed, and some are moving that way. I think eventually everybody will because they're tired of the bulbs and the projectors, and that's
Always $500.
the bulbs are not cheap, and then when projectors die, you can kind of cannibalize them. sort of help them survive. So I think there's some value into looking at, hey, an all-in-one thing. Like right now, like our dishwasher in our house, like 2 buttons broke on it. When they came out to fix it, they just took the whole door off the front, put a whole new door. Like they used to fix the 2 buttons that were broken, but now it's just easier to just, there's a new door. I'm like, oh, good, great. I can break this one too.
And with those TVs, do we get warranties with them? Are we buying extra warranties?
We can look into, we will look into additional coverage on those.
Yeah, because once you get into the touchscreen thing.
So we don't capitalize them, is that
All
right?
those buttons
Because
will have to be.
they're individually less than 5,000? Yeah. You know if that's in a bulk order?
We are in the position that we do not capitalize them. From the individual standpoint, they're $3,200, I believe it is, and I expect them to have a long life, but I don't want to have to capitalize every TV.
Well, no, tracking, I meant like one bulk one.
Yeah.
Like the bulk purchase.
A full purchase. Yeah.
That's not our practice then.
So like I said,
Policy.
these are the 4 items to be discussed at length, but these are having an impact, as you can see, on our supplies and textbook budget, which is a $1.2 million increase. This is just to give the committee an idea in terms of healthcare expenditures. Obviously, they trend up, right? Healthcare only goes up. There are years in which we can go to market through our Bucksmont consortium, as indicated in 2023, where there was a little bit of a reset. We make them go and sharpen their pencils. Right now, we are under request for proposals for prescription. All requests for proposal answers are due back from vendors by the end of January. So hopefully with them going out to an RFP, they're sharpening their pencils, we can see a little bit more savings from that prescription line item. But right now, for the purpose of this presentation, it's a 7% weighted average on the increase in healthcare. PSERS, again, this is just a diagram to show that PSERS only goes up, unfortunately. Not the best slide, but you can see that the school district investment for 2024-25 is budgeted at $22.9 million, and next year we're looking at about $23.6 million. That's representative, $756,000 increase. Again, that 1/10 of a point, albeit small, does have a big effect on it when you have a $70 million salary line item. Our debt service obligations, when we get to 2045, we will see significant savings. However, right now, with the current refinancing we had over the following 2 years, we will see savings on those 2 line items. But we always want to make sure we're either in a deficit standpoint or we're flat with expectations. Again, this does not account for any new money, any new projects, but just to give the board ideas to making sure that we're remaining flat in terms of debt service. Those dollars are built into our budget. Those mills are built into the millage rate. It just would be any potential refinance that we will continue to look at doing going forward. Overall, the summary page, you can see that with let's skip to the bottom real quick. I apologize. I know everybody's looking at that top number. Projected revenues of $158,862,784. Expenditures of $163,458,992. We would need to increase taxes 3.48%, and the recommendation tonight of the administration is to use $1 million in fund balance. Like I said, we just moved over $326,000 into our assigned balance, bringing that to $4.3 million. So recommendation tonight, as of tonight's presentation for 25-26, would be a 3.48% tax increase and using $1 million in fund balance. That would bring our fund balance down overall from $27.3 million to $26.3 million. Still a healthy fund balance to maintain our AAA rating with Moody's and the S&P 500s. Should we need to go out for debt or should we need to refinance? That $1 million is basically the administration's challenge, not just to me, but to principals and department heads that look for that savings. Where can we somehow harness, whether it's purchasing power or buying in bulk purchases, $1 million? Well, correspondingly, it also challenges me and my office to look for the greatest yield possible in terms of investment income or chasing down delinquent tax collections. But as it stands right now, The recommendation would be 3.48% and a use of $1 million of fund balance. That is just as of January. We'll have 3 more meetings before we have to finalize, but that is what we're currently looking at.
Quick question
3.48%.
on the fund balance to maintain ratings, what is the sort of threshold there?
We would need to keep,
Is that a percentage of total budget?
it's 23% of the rolling average of your last 3 budgets. And overall and it also includes your capital reserve. So our capital reserve is another $16 million. So we're looking at 42. The threshold for us is about 31. So well above. However, I will qualify that by saying that our capital reserves are 16 million, but they're allocated for various projects that Mr. Lau has identified with roofing, AC units, HVAC, elevators potentially, or a brand new building should we need to build a new elementary school. The $16 million is there, but it's essentially all earmarked. We'll get into that at the facility meetings next month when we do our 5-year capital. But if you think about just where we stood last year, we had $50 million in commitments, including roofing, and we had $16 million in the coffer. Right now, like I said, we'd be looking at $27 million to begin the year and using about $1 million. And I use the term use loosely because it's also just a challenge for administration to save $1 million or somehow find a way to generate $1 million more in revenue. That's what I'll be working over the next 2 months. We'll also have continuous budget meetings with department heads and principals to see where we can really sharpen our pencils. But right now, for the purposes of tonight, this is where we stand. You can see historically, Act 1 index over the last couple of years has been 4.1 and 5.3. This year is 4.0. And the recommendation, like I said, is 3.48, still below Act 1 index as mandated by PDE. What does the 3.48% look like in terms of a tax parcel out in our community? You can see that with homes with assessed value, it would raise taxes $89.36. On $154,550, which is our median assessed value of all the homes in the area, $138.11, and over $200,000, $178. I did work with the Montgomery County Board of Assessments just to get a general idea. How many parcels does this affect by bucket? You can see that there's about 23,000 residential units. This does not account for apartments. This does not account for condominiums. This is just residential units as identified by Montgomery County. It's about 2,300 residents or residential units at 100,000. 5,800 units at 154, and the bulk weight is 66 residential units at an assessment value of 200%. That 200% assessment value equates to about $633,000 in market value of a home. That's not me telling these people that they would need to move, but just to give you an idea as to what we're looking at when we talk about assessment value to value of these parcels. But again, in the shout out Sue Moore tax increment every 10th, 3.48, this is what we would be looking at right here. If we were to move forward with a 3.4% increase, where does this put Colonial in terms of competition with other school districts? How attractive are we to not just commercial, but also to residential? We would still maintain the 3rd lowest millage in the county. That's assuming all other school districts don't move their millage at all. If every other district in the county does a 0% and we do the required 3.48, we are still 3rd lowest in the county. And this just puts the numbers to that chart just as an FYI. A lot of numbers getting thrown tonight. 2 takeaways I'd like the committee to take away. 1, obviously 3.48% tax increase with $1 million in fund balance being utilized or challenged to the administration, as well as the 4 programs being discussed. Dr. Christian, myself, and Dr. Gagaitis, we will continue to make sure we do our due diligence on those 4 items, but just so the board or the committee and the board are aware of, this is what we're looking at in terms of new dollars for 25-26.
Couple of things. All the detail Mark provided is great. When we talk about putting $1 million of fund balance in the budget, the challenge is for us not to use it, and specifically not to impact the instructional program. So you would not hear us come back next November and say, oh, by the way, we need this because otherwise we can't have reading support. I'm just picking arbitrary things. That's we look at areas like facilities, technology, those costs. If we can get better prices on some consumables that our kids use that still have the same instructional impact on the kids, that's where we have to sharpen our pencils. So that's number one. Number two, from an enrollment perspective, I misspoke earlier. Third grade's not 560; it's just under 530. But first and second grade are 475, so they'll be 500 by the time they get up to the CES. Current kindergarten is 420. So we'll see where this coming kindergarten comes in. And to Mrs. Epstein's point, like, do we need to have that conversation five years from now about needing to build? If we keep getting 420 and lower, I think the district will be fine. Full, but that's what you want. You want to utilize all of your buildings. Now we are using a couple learning cottages over at Ridge and Plymouth, but 1 and 2 classrooms here and there is not, we can be creative. It's like, if we didn't do anything at CES, we'd be 8 to 10 classrooms short. And you just obviously can't have that. I mean, could you make it work? Yeah, but you have people sharing and you have 3 reading specialists in a room. That's not a quality instructional program. And remember, the work that we're doing at CES too was to clearly also improve security and separate the DL distinctly from CES without enlarging the footprint, which is what we're doing. We're using a lot of space that's currently in there. And it's a good 40-year decision. So you're not going to go back to CES, or future boards aren't going to go back there and do that. And then lastly, 3.48 is where we are January 13th. Obviously, we want to try to whittle that down. But there are certain realities we have, and competitive. The board has done a great job offering competitive contracts, which made it enabled the administration to have a quality teaching staff, and an era where it is difficult for even suburban districts to fully staff their positions. So we'll continue to whittle it down as much as we can, but there are some realities where we have commitments that we have to honor.
Also, the new building and stuff like page 18, right? Like we're in the crux for the next, I don't know, 5 years, like $6 million a year.
In
plus
debt
interest,
service.
right? So
Yeah.
That really doesn't significantly drop to under $4 million for another 12 years. So.
And we do, Mark and I met with representatives of our firefighters and EMS. We have plenty of detail on that. We'll come back and present more on that later, but we do support it. That is a goal to incentivize more folks to volunteer in the community. And they were really good at providing the detail. Chris Schwartz from Plymouth is leading that for all 3 municipalities. And he's obviously vested in the district as a resident and as an employee.
Thank you, Dr. Frisch. If there's no other questions, that'll finalize the 25-26 budget development agenda item, and then thus conclude my agenda for tonight.
One last question. Each 0.1% increase equates to approximately how much?
$106,000.
Was that?
$106,000. Every 1/10 of a point that you want to change one way or another, 348 to 358 or 338, is $106,000.
Kind of wish you could do that a little faster.
So if you said theoretically what is required from balance, that would take the increase to like 2 point.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
If we said like we want to use $2 million to fund balance, it would theoretically take the increase down to like 2 point.
2.58.
Sharon?
What's the average cost for a new employee, like a new teacher coming in, or salary with them?
Starting salary on a bachelor's step 1 is $56,000. If you're looking at about 22% in benefits, so and from just Peasers and taxes, so you're looking at
80, 85?
I'm sorry.
80, 85?
Yeah. By the time you get healthcare, prescription, LTD, long-term care, about $85,000.
So about every time.
We have
Maybe about-
there's about $340,000 budget for those 4 teachers, which comes out to about
And
$80,000.
if we got, it's a great question, if we got a spike, and let's say the new kindergarten's huge, we have to hire 6 people instead of 4. 4's in there as a budget. Generally, we get some attritional savings through retirements that we can make up for a position or two. If we really get walloped, we would come back to you before final budget adoption and say, hey, listen, we need to put in these additional positions. And that's a sort of a little bit of a waiting game between now and April.
Do we even incentivize our faculty and staff to say by the state, yes, I am, no, I'm not, is there something?
We do. We talk about, we have a couple different incentives in there regarding benefits and things like that, extending them. Just to let us know, and the other reason, not just financial, to get the job posted, to be competitive in a competitive job market.
So around April?
Yeah. We try to get most of our hiring done before July 15th. And then August is just for the surprises.
I think we also will have a bubble year of retiring at the
Yeah.
high school.
Yeah, there's a bubble.
It's bad.
They remind me when I walk.
I know,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of
Yeah.
teachers that are at, 4 years, 3 years?
Yeah, one of my previous settings, the board did it, they called it an ERIP, Early Retirement Incentive Program. And it was a 2-year program. I was not the superintendent at the time, so not to throw anybody under the bus, but in my opinion, it wasn't written as well as it could have been. And it was a 2-year window, but there was no cap in either year. So 3 people went in year 1 and 21 people went in year 2. And I took the superintendency in year 2, which was really foolish. And so, all kidding aside, we got everybody replaced, but a lot of talent walked out the door. And when you lose like 3 or 4 AP teachers in 1 year, it's tough replacing 1. Like replace 4. And so it saved the district some money, but it was difficult to see some of the people leave. Yeah, you're right, Chris. There was a little bubble in high
It's
school.
like 3 or 4 years, right?
3 to 5 years, yeah. Hopefully they'll be staggered and not all. So, and let's not offer an E-RIP in.
No. No.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
We'll take 2 minutes and then we'll get curriculum started.
Yeah, so we're all outside, waiting.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks.
Alright.
Thank you.
Thanks,
No.
everyone.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the curriculum committee meeting for Monday, January 13th, 2025. Happy New Year. So great to see so many friends here. Any public comment on tonight's agenda? All right, seeing none, let's pass it over to Mrs. Brigaitis.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Marino. Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to our January meeting. We go right to our agenda. You will see that this is our annual meeting that we share with the board and our community, our annual progress, some amazing points of pride, and how we plan for continuous improvement in our district. We are here also to share PW High School's program of studies for next year, and I'll explain why those dates are on when we get to that point in the agenda, and a few conference requests as well. Thank you, Mrs. Aiken. So before we jump into the data, I have to do my annual explanation. I'm going to quickly review the federal and the state regulations that speak to the accountability that we are held to in the Colonial School District. So the Every Student Succeeds Act was signed into law in 2015. Basically, ESSA, which is the Every Student Succeeds Act, provided the states flexibility to design their own education systems, but it maintained the focus on improving educational outcomes for all students. So the Future Ready Index is one of Pennsylvania's accountability requirements. There are many more, educator effectiveness system, but tonight we're going to hear more about the Future Ready Index from both Plymouth Whitemarsh and Colonial Middle School. It's basically designed to give our public, our community, a more comprehensive look at how we are doing as a school district. It considers various indicators, academic achievement, academic growth, career readiness, attendance, graduation rates, all related to students' preparedness for the future. The next slide you see is fast facts. I was gonna say fun facts. Fast facts. And basically this is provided from the Future Ready Index, not only for our district, but for each individual school. So the leadership teams from the schools will be explaining the fast facts as well for their buildings. And this is also part of the Future Ready Index. These are the progress measures that I mentioned previously. Again, we're gonna focus this evening on Colonial Middle School and Plymouth White Marsh High School. Next month, we will focus on our elementary schools. The instructional leaders that you see in front of you this evening, there's a lot of them, so welcome to all of them as well. They were asked to come and share their successes, but also focus on opportunities for growth. The current mission of the Colonial School District is for students to learn, grow, and serve, thank you, Marla, in a school community that is welcoming for all. Again, I spoke to you earlier how ESSA was very concerned about all students. This year, we have asked our principals through our school improvement planning teams to really focus on that all, to really look at our subgroup data and see where we can find areas of opportunity. Where can we grow? So you're gonna hear more about those opportunities for growth this evening. Pennsylvania does not require Colonial to do school improvement plans. We are a well-performing school district. However, we do have areas that we need to grow. We do ask each of our schools to put together a school improvement plan. This year, again, the focus for that school improvement plan is on subgroup data coming directly from Future Ready Index as well as our local assessment data. So without further ado, we're gonna look at the keys for the progress measures. You have seen these before. The state gives us some arrows up and down, which do delineate whether we had an increase in performance or a decrease in that performance from the previous year. And then we have some color-coded icons. You are going to see that they talk about statewide goal. Again, that goal is set for 2033. And I'm gonna talk briefly about that in 1 second, as well as interim targets for every single year. Those targets and goals are set for all students and all subgroups. So we're gonna talk a little bit more about that. And then this crazy slide is just an example for you to look at. A lot of people say, well, where did the state come up with these interim targets? Where did they come up with the statewide goal for 2033? This is exactly how they came up with it. They took the baseline data for proficient and advanced students on our statewide assessments from the school year of 2017. The goal was by 2030, because they wanted to look at a stretch of 12 years, to decrease the non-proficiency rates of our students by half. Then they divided back and got each of those interim targets. Then we had a pandemic. So the state decided in order to account for the pandemic, they pushed our goals out to 2033. So no longer do we have the nice little calculations we had, it now goes to 2033. So that just gives you a little bit of a background. Keep in mind the baselines that you see here are averages of both PSSA and Keystones. They do not account for grade level specifics. We do, Colonial School District gets our own interim targets and statewide goals by 2033. Each school has those and they were aware of them when they did their school improvement planning as well. Any questions on any of that before we hear from the real stars in the room? Great, we're gonna start with Dr. Kaplan and his instructional team and hear more about Colonial Middle School.
Thank you, Mrs. Grigaitis. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for all your support throughout the school year. Happy New Year as well. Excited to share our annual achievement reporting and highlights of our school improvement plan this year. We'll start with the fast facts for the building that are obviously reflective of the district overall. We have just under 1,300 students, and as of now, they're distributed pretty evenly across all 3 grade levels. Economically disadvantaged percentages, just over a quarter. 2.4% of our students are English language learners, and just under 20% are in special education. That is certainly all taken into consideration as we look at our benchmark data from this year, which we'll take a look at in just a moment. And then we'll do a deeper reflection into how our students performed last year as it relates to both proficiency on the state assessments and also growth, not just by subgroup, but something that was particularly important to us this year, growth by the achievement band that the state sets them in based on their historical data. So that's what we have to come. And I'll hand it off to Mr. Lyle to take a look at our benchmark assessment data. Again, this is data that students put forward to us based on assessments right at the start of the school year. Oh, sorry about that. Sorry about that, Mike. I jumped the gun there. I'm going to keep going on this part.
jump in and do it.
Sorry, Mr. Lyle. I was eager to hand it off to Mike. This is our data from when the students first came in. In other words, didn't receive any instruction beyond the basic start of the year for the grade level that they're just getting started. And you can see there's not a huge variety, this is for English to start, between how this year's sixth graders performed at the start of the year compared to last year's sixth graders. This is just a starting point, again, before our teachers got to work with students. And we're really excited to have the Form B test administered right around the corner here, middle of February, to see how students are responding to our instruction and take a closer look at the item analysis by particular student, by particular standard, by particular teacher, to really dig in and make sure that that informs our instruction the rest of the way. The next slide has math, and again, the data was really similar year over year. The one highlight here is that our sixth graders at the beginning of the year performed a lot better. It's hard to pinpoint a rhyme or reason for that. It's obviously different groups, different day, different test, but that's something that is really a valuable data point at the start of the year, because it informs our teachers right away that those students are prepared for maybe a little bit more rigorous instruction or less time on material that would previously be considered review. So that's an example of how we look at the benchmark A data. And again, everyone's really chomping at the bit to see the Form B data and plan out the rest of the year from there. Now Mr. Lyle's ready for Future Ready.
I'm going to talk about the Future Ready Index for proficient and advanced students. We're happy with where we are right now, moving towards 2033. Presently in ELA, we're 18.7% above the state average, 8.5% away from our 2033 goal. In math, we're 19.3% above the state average and 12.3% away from our 2033 goal. Science, we're 15.8% above the state average and 8% away from the goal. So we feel like we're making progress to that goal, and that's something that we'll be able to achieve by 2033. Now, last year, our growth was all in the blue. Our growth slowed a little bit in ELA and math, and we see this as an opportunity. We're dialed into the data with PBOS. We don't just look at the school, we look at the grade level, we look at individual teachers, cohorts of kids, how they're progressing through with the PBOS, and we're using that to see what the people that are really successful, what are they doing, and we're using them to kind of inform our other teachers. And we've had a great year, had some, we're going to speak about that later, some professional development with some of the teachers that are showing the most growth with students, sharing their expertise with the other students.
So this, looking at the data from last year's performance, our growth slowed. It was all in the blue previously. This time around, we slowed down. We didn't grow as much as we'd like. So we're going to take a really close look at what leads to that in any event, when we're successful or when we're not as successful as what we'd like. And that's what this slide shows here. The blue rectangles are more of our strengths, subgroups where our data was really good, not just meeting or exceeding expectations, but in certain instances, doing better than the previous year. On the ELA side, on the left of the screen, you can see our Black students didn't just exceed the growth standard for ELA, they exceeded it by quite a bit, more so than the previous year. Like Mrs. Gergaitis mentioned earlier, the blue is where we exceeded the growth measure, the green is where we met it, and the arrow indicates performance compared to the year before. So you can see in those categories we're meeting or exceeding with some variety. But what really contributes, in our opinion, to the red growth on the year overall is that all student group. And that warrants a little bit further of an investigation, which the next slide shows. We spent a lot of time with all of our teachers as a grade level department team and also as individuals to look at growth among achievement groups. Based on historical data, how students have performed on all of their PSSAs, the state gives us an estimate on how they're going to perform. A lower performing student, middle performing student, or a high performing student. And in this example, for 8th grade ELA, you can see our historically lowest achieving students grew very well, exceeded the state's expectation. Our middle achieving students were right around what they were expected to do, and our highest students didn't grow as much or grew backwards, so to speak. So what we've been working on a lot is recognizing how many students are in each of those categories. We're proficient and advanced in a lot of ways. Most of our students are in the high and middle achieving groups. So what that says in this example is that we really need to focus on having high rigor, high expectations with high support for all the differentiated groups so that we can have everyone moving in that direction. The next slide is a real point of pride for us. Our 8th grade math team, you can see 222 of our students were in the highest achieving group, and they grew exceedingly far. And then same thing with our middle group and same thing with our lowest group. And that speaks to what we're really trying to push all of our teachers to do and support them in, is to make sure that the standards are high, the rigor is high, and the support is high for everyone, regardless of their starting point. And starting point is kind of the term that we've been adopting. You know, we can call low, middle, and high, but it's based on, you know, what it is that they're equipped with and what blanks we need to help them fill. One more example here is 7th grade ELA, just to get out of 8th grade for a moment. You can see our teachers are doing a really good job of meeting our students that are at a lower starting point, and that's great, and that takes a ton of effort, but we need to make sure that we're continually pushing everyone. And there's all kinds of conversations being had about the challenges of growing higher achievers and maybe not having as far to go. But if you go back to the 8th grade math slide for a second, that proves what we believe is to be true about having high expectations for everyone and really believing that our kids can do it with the right support. Here's just a little bit further narrative about our subgroup analysis, strength and opportunities. Starting with ELA, subgroups that are well above or above the growth standard. In 8th grade, our Black students, our Hispanic students, and our lowest performing 33rd, which I just referenced, are all above or well above. In 6th and 7th grade, in 7th grade to start, our lowest performing 33rd, 33% is above the growth standard, and our Hispanic students are above the growth standard in 6th grade. Again, what I mentioned as an opportunity for us is that all student group was below the growth standard. We have many that are meeting, but we need to make sure that we push the whole grade there across the building. On math, 8th grade continues to just be really a model for everyone, and incredible hard work and commitment to make sure that they're reaching every student in every subgroup and in every starting point. Can't say enough about the good work that 8th grade math does as leaders in our building. And then in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we're really proud that our English language learners are meeting the standard in every grade. We want to make sure that we get caught up in 6th and 7th grade. That's a little bit about the subgroup analysis and the kind of PVAS investigation that we do with teachers. The next few slides, I'm going to hand it off to Mrs. Spivey, who's going to speak to our WIDA performance for our English learners.
So we are going to continue to drill down a little bit to look at the success that our ELD students have had. So this first slide kind of goes over how they're performing, or how they did perform on the 23-24 assessment by grade level across the six different performance levels. So those are descriptors that show how they are performing at each level and have specific details about what they can do so that teachers are able to use this information to plan future lessons based on what they're ready to tackle. Just so that you know, there are 30 students that took the assessment last year. which is 12 more students than the 22-23 school year, 9 of which were new to the district. There are 7 languages that are represented by the students that took the assessment. And this doesn't include students that are exited and being monitored. So this is just students in active support through our ELD program. The next slide really drills down even further by showing you the subscores that they're working on as a cohort. So in order to be considered a cohort student, you have to have been in the district at least 2 years so that we have some data to track you with. So if you look at that last column, it's the composite score where we grew from 3.3 to 3.8 from the 22-23 school year to the 23-24 school year. And I really wanted to highlight the largest jump that we had in the subscore of literacy, where we went from 3.1 to 3.8. So this just really highlights the overall positive growth for all of our students in the ELD program based on their cohort and their subscore. And then this last slide, it is really the same as the first, except instead of looking at it from a grade level perspective, it looks at all the students based on the levels of performance. And so you can see the 22-23 year, the N is the number of students. There were 18. We jumped to 30 for the 23-24 school year. So that's a big increase in terms of the number of students that we're servicing. And with that support, the information that Ms. Penrice gleans from that, she really uses it to drill down to see exactly what students need in terms of their areas of growth. This year, 6th grade seemed to need a little bit more support. There's a kind of a steadying, and just because of the length of time students in 7th and 8th grade have been in the district. So she's able to really use this along with, of course, the benchmarks to identify what supports are needed for each group of students. Again, this doesn't include students that are monitoring, but it is also important to note that for the last 4 years, which is the length of time that they are monitored, we have not had any students go back into active instruction through the ELD program. So that really speaks to the fact that when they get out, they're continuing to make that positive growth. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lashley.
Good evening, how are you? All right, good to see you. I'll be having the opportunity to talk about the school improvement plan highlights. So the first thing that we've been focusing on is small group instruction. All right, so the first thing that we've really been trying to do to help with small group instruction is that teacher-led professional development. So having those teacher leaders within the building gather the teachers together and help work through what small group instruction is, best practices, and things like that. Moving forward, we had an opportunity to support how we're going to embed our walkthroughs. So Dr. Kaplan and the rest of my colleagues, we have an opportunity to go into classrooms and have a very focused lens when we go in, when we talk about small group instruction. PVOS data that reflects what focuses on subgroups that we talked about previously, and then using those Linkit fingertip reports to identify those specific students and help create those small groups within those moments. The assessment practices, we're looking at how we can focus our efforts to develop and continue to maintain our high standards and expectations for students from all starting points. And then looking at assessment analysis during our PLT sessions to make sure we're continually having that rigor and correlation to the PSSA. We have an opportunity for our Desmos threads where teachers are coming out into smaller teams and training one another on how to use those Desmos and being able to implement it within the classroom. Our science-specific piece is the in-depth preparation and innovation related to the STEEL standards, which are the new standards that have rolled out for science, and how we can build those assessment practices for all grades. Then the last piece is our Resolve Room, which is a great program where we're having an opportunity to work with Ms. Aida Thompson on different conflict resolution strategies and using that to kind of help decrease the amount of discipline that we have to do and looking to target certain behaviors and how can we work through it through the conflict resolution process. And then the last piece, which I'm excited about, is our Points of Pride. So our No Place for Hate student leadership group is doing great things around the building. Some great programs and things of that nature are coming up in the future. Our DVCEE student ambassadors are having the opportunity to go and train with other students around the state. Our athletic program, which is a big point of pride, have all finished within the top 3 within the MCAA, except for just one group, and they missed it by maybe a small percentage point. Our TSA recognition and honors, outstanding visual arts community recognition by the Pennsylvania Art Educators Association. The collaboration with the PW Music Department, we've had an opportunity to bring our music teachers together to build the program. We're looking at them coming together, sharing students, sharing ideas, and then hoping that those students make that transition from the middle school to the high school. Our National Junior Honor Society peer tutoring is up and running. Students are literally looking for us, especially in 6th grade. They're like, Mr. Lashley, I'm trying to find my student. You know where they're at? Can you partner us together? And then they're spending real quality time working through that tutoring process. Data conferences and goal setting with students, team spirit rallies where all the colors are coming together and they're having a real big opportunity to join together. And then the big piece is the looping model. I've had an opportunity to talk with some of my other peers on how they really felt about the loop. And just moving with the students, with the guidance counselor and yourself, with those students, getting to know them, moving throughout the 3 grades together, building those relationships, and then sending them off to high school prepared and knowing truly who they are and how to really cater to them. And the last piece is the academic competition. So dream it, design it, math counts, math Olympiads, model UN, and much, much more. So thank you so much.
Thanks for your support, everyone. Happy to answer any questions that you may have as well.
First of all, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing everything. I personally am really thrilled to see the growth of our English language students. You knew that was coming, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see that we've had such an increase in the number of students too within the middle school. I think just 2 wonderings I had, but not even related to this. Of course, growth is what we're after. So thank you for diving deep into the PBOS data. Thank you for continuing to lift the subgroups and to monitor that growth. But I just have some wonderings around the science. Really great to see that strong growth as well. Isn't this the year that the test is shifting or it's becoming the field test? Is that this year? Yeah.
Maria's very happy with it.
Yeah.
I should have mentioned that in the beginning. Mr. Wilson can speak to it a little bit better than I can, but in preparation of all of those changes from the assessment and into the curriculum and instruction piece of it, all of the data that we have in the past isn't necessarily relevant for where we're going in the future. So we're really pleased with the work that they're doing, what was reflected in the past. They are working their tails off and really motivated and energized by these changes, but from a quantitative standpoint, with things changing so much, it's not as relevant to what we're doing now.
Yeah.
This year's PSSA is a field test, so none of the data will count, and PBOS will start all over again following school year once the new steel standards are in place, and that is in fact what's assessed. So this year is kind of like a gift almost for us because we can try some different things with assessments, and as you know, only 8th grade is assessed at the middle school level, so that's also a challenge. But 6th and 7th grade are working and collaborating also with 8th grade, so we're trying to build up that capacity by the time these new PSSAs come through with the new standards.
So the following year will be the baseline.
Correct.
And
And in 3 years till PBOS comes out.
Right. And then is this also the year the PSSA is going fully online?
Yes,
Yeah.
we are gonna be all online, but the shift in science is still remains 8th grade, but it goes from 4th to 5th.
Right.
So our 5th graders will be taking it again.
Cool. That's all I had. I thank you for the very clear presentation. Like, great to see the narrative as well as the numbers. Really appreciate that. What other questions do we have?
These numbers reflected year over year as far as the growth. I feel like last year all the groups were up, and then this year it's like bad luck, or not bad luck, but like just a weird year.
It's challenging to pinpoint because it's a different group of kids and it's one data point, but it's obviously stretched out over a large number. It's hard to say exactly, but you're right that this time last year the growth was really good, and this time around it wasn't as far as we wanted to. It's also challenging because within the building you have students that grew a ton, which is great, and then their historical data you have to continue to grow them apart. We say to our teachers a lot though that just because they're a high achiever, just like that 8th grade math example, doesn't mean that they can't grow, and that's what we really need to stay committed to.
And then, is there a subgroup called like years in district? So like, we've had the student for 5 years versus the student just got here this year.
Internally only.
Yeah, we do look at that data ourselves, and they spoke to that for our RETA assessment data as well, but that is not a specific subgroup of the state.
I think it was early 2000s when I was a principal. You could there was a formula formula to, you didn't have to count students who had been in the district less than 6 months. Wow, but that lasted like a year or two, and then it became day one, your student.
Or October, whoever's there.
Yeah.
October
That's what it was, yeah.
Has this same measurement been used over time? In other words, sort of about the growers and what you might expect or not expect, right? There's some typical variability that you might expect. So if you have longitudinal data dating back 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, then you can sort of see, yes, it's a different group of kids, and there's different sort of demographic characteristics, et cetera, but you still understand whether or not you're somewhat in the expected variability.
Mhm.
Is it possible to look at that so you don't sort of get too stressed out? Obviously you want to grow regardless, but there's some variability that's expected, just like there is in the average temperature in January, right? It's right before we worry about global warming, it's like, oh, it's 9 degrees warmer, 10 degrees colder as opposed to 2 or 3 degrees we would expect. Is there a way to look at that longitudinally dating back however many years worth of data you have?
There is, and on the PBOS website that we pulled a lot of this data from, you can have it by building, grade level, by subgroups of the demographic group also. We do look at that, we pull it out, but there's also it adds a lot more variables to testing changes, curriculum changes, things like that. So
Right,
it's
so
nice
there's
to have.
additional noise in there.
Exactly.
And I guess one other question in terms, and I think I ask this every year, well, it's only been my second year, so, which is, do we have a way to look at sort of our peer group in terms of schools that we would think are the caliber of White Marsh, right? And to determine how likely it is that the growers are plateauing, or whatever you think you may be seeing, to sort of contextualize that data, because to look at an individual data point is the same way without unexpected variability, you sort of are confused of exactly what I'm seeing without the longitudinal backdrop. And another level of that is, what are the lower mayors, whoever we might compare ourselves to, what do they see? Is that data available through the state as well to sort of, again, can help provide additional interpretation context for what we're seeing when we're seeing something less than we might see? That doesn't change your goals necessarily, but again, it gives you some solace in the fact that you would expect that kind of variability. And with just this snapshot, it's hard to sort of really understand.
Correct, and we do see that as well through the state sites as well as our local Linkit warehouse, our data warehouse. We're able to compare. We typically outperform the county and the state in mostly everything that we do. And again, we specifically asked to show the board what we're working on with their school improvement plans. We could have continued to go here and just show you all the great things that are on these reports, which we did, because that's important to also capitalize on our strengths, but we wanted to make sure that we were very transparent with what we are doing with our areas of growth.
Yeah,
So-
so like the state, right, that's not like really.
Comparable because we
Right.
crushed the
Right.
state, yes,
Right, that's the
exactly.
whole-
You can see comp data among districts. You can't get to the level of detail that you get in your own plan. You can see an overview of other districts.
And we do only choose the districts that really are comparable with us.
Sometimes we do it manually on the Future Ready site, other times Linkit actually published, I think it was last week, a report on who they work with in the county that helps us do exactly what
I'll say one more question. Theoretically, in math, 2024 seventh graders, they got 29% proficient, 13% on the bubble. But then those are the same eighth graders as 24-25s who dropped to 15 and 9, right? It's basically the same cohort like a year
But
later.
the eighth grade test, it's a non-calculator test. So the eighth grade test includes irrational numbers, cube roots, square roots without a calculator. So that's why you see that drop, because it's the first time they're really working with the irrational numbers. And they haven't been taught irrational numbers yet. And that A is kind of the pre-test, so that's why you see that big drop.
It's also cumulative over several years versus the Keystone test, which is why you see in the same cohort, eighth graders who hit the trigger course for the Keystone exam, which there are a few, the passing rate is like 90-some% across the county and 80-some% in the state. But the same students in the PSSA do not have as high of a proficient or advanced score because one's a cumulative test and the other is an end of course test.
So theoretically, as we go forward on this, we should expect to see decreasing returns because we've gotten a higher percentage of our students to proficient advanced.
Correct.
So our end numbers are gonna, so the early ones we can say, oh, it's great, it's big. But then as we go forward in future years, we should be like, oh, there's really only 1 or 2% gain to get, or like reason, okay.
So I guess my question is more like, now that you have this data, like what kind of changes in how we teach the kids as globally, like what kind of changes do you see that you might be implementing, or what does it look to a teacher now, like they have this data now, where do we go from here?
I think
And
the big,
can I just add to Chris's question real quick before you respond? I'm also curious about the PBOS piece with the teachers. So obviously your 8th grade math teachers are in the dark blue and whatever, but I'm curious to Chris's point, like what are those conversations? We don't need to put this public meeting, of course, but like what does that look like in terms of support for those who are not meeting the expectations? Sorry, I just wanted to put that before you said.
So on the first part, the small group instruction as it relates to our school improvement plan is probably the biggest thing, and being really mindful of getting away from what we do unintentionally at times of this either or thinking. I can reach all of these students there at a lower starting point, and everyone else will be fine because they're at a good starting point already, or I can make it really hard and leave them in the dust. It doesn't have to be that way. And at our November in-service day in particular, this is what Mr. Lashley was speaking about a bit as a highlight. We had 2 teachers that are exemplary with their small group instruction and went over what does that model look like in their classroom. How can I give my highest achievers a meaningful task while I'm working with students that need a little bit more support, and vice versa, and spreading that out. Not just in ELA and math, but a model for everyone to differentiate and make sure that everyone gets all of the all of the need to have, but then also slowing down the pace that we're moving at a little bit to really ensure that everyone's getting it, whichever starting point they're at.
Thanks, that's great. We don't get to go in the classroom and see like, but I know like teaching is constantly evolving, and so I'm just curious to see what has shifted because of this data.
What I was saying earlier, some of our teachers who were in the blue have presented to our other teachers what they do in the classroom, and we've seen that across the school. The teachers are really buying into it.
And then as part of that, what Mr. Latch was talking about with regard to the walkthroughs, the follow-up is now that they've had this support and training from their colleagues, going in to see how they're doing, to see what additional support they might need.
Thank you.
Good, thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
And now our instructional team from PW. We have Dr. Bacani and his whole team. You got a tough act to follow there, Dr. Bacani.
So all the questions are over though, right?
Yes, exactly. They've reached their quota.
I'm just getting started.
You have 11
I'm ready. Thank you for having us today. Happy New Year. We're excited to share a lot of our data that we've been going through as a team at Plymouth White Marsh High School. Not only our administrative team, but our PLT teams, our school improvement planning teams, as well as our entire staff. So similar to the Colonial Middle Schools, here's our PWHS facts, which come straight from PDE, which has our demographics regarding economic disadvantage, our Ls, our special education population, etc. So we'll walk you through first is kind of the global component, which is our overview of our Keystone examinations and our achievement data. Nancy, go to the next slide, please. Thanks. And the first slide that we're going to show you is a comparison of, and you're asking about the county data, it is released via PDE. So this is a snapshot. The next one, Nance, is a comparison of how our students performed on our Keystone examinations compared to the state as well as the county. Very proud to share, I know Rosemary mentioned this, regarding our students are really achieving. And that's shown not only in comparison with the state, but also in comparison to the county. Top 5 in the county in all 3 areas, 23 high schools in Montgomery County, as far as the IU is concerned, outperforming the Commonwealth by at least 22% in each of the areas. And then you'll see shortly in all 3 areas that our students are continuing to achieve in terms of growth in biology as well as literature and algebra. So we're going to walk the group through the growth similar to the middle school, what they did. The first set, it will be based upon our achievement groups, and then we're going to break it down by disaggregate student groups. The first slide is based upon the Future Ready Index, and this is readily available to the public. And as you can see here, very proud once again that we met the academic growth score overall in all 3 areas. That's for several years in a row, which I think is a credit to the amazing staff and students that we have at PW. We're going to walk through with the next slide, Nance, is our PVOS summary, and this is very similar to what Sean shared. As you can see from the graphic, in all 3 areas, our students, all of them, that took the Keystone examinations in algebra, in literature, and biology, were well above the growth standard. The growth index provides a measure of evidence that student met, exceeded, or did not meet the growth standard. In all 3 areas, our students were well above that threshold. This is the 6th year in a row that PW has significantly exceeded that growth standard through our academic achievement results. So then we're getting into, not the granular level yet, the more specific level, and as similar to the middle school, our PLT teams during collaborative days are looking at not only our Keystone data, but our local level assessments, our Linkit form assessments, as well as our unit assessments to take a look at all of our students and seeing how they're progressing. This is a graphic that will show all 3 of our areas. As you can see from the graph, there's moderate evidence that the group exceeded the growth standard. Green is evidence that the group met the standard, and then yellow, which you don't want to see, but obviously we're very open if we do see, is moderate evidence that the group did not meet the standard. As you can see, from our lowest predicted achieving group to our highest, each of our groups are demonstrating strong growth, and we're moving students based upon their anticipated score on each of the exams. We're going to continue with the student group theme, and then get into what does it look like in terms of our school improvement planning, which starts in the summer when we're meeting with Linkit and we're looking at data. We have our teacher teams that are in the what now component. And here's the graphic that is shown for the next slide, Nancy, that has, once again, the breakdown of all of our groups. So each of our individual teachers, as mentioned by the question, I believe by Mrs. Epstein, will receive how their students performed overall PVOS data in terms of growth, and then by disaggregate group. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. King, who supervises the math department, to go over our algebra data. Okay? You're welcome.
All right, hi everyone. So the algebra data, we're going to start with our PVOS growth. So you're going to see that there's dark blue for all of the areas. So we're very happy that we're making growth. And so we can go up 2 slides, please. So this is what we're focusing on. This is the Future Ready Index. So these are the goals. So the 2033 goal for proficiency, we're already meeting as an all student group. So what we did is we're taking a look at these interim targets. So they look different for each subject area. The math, I'm going to speak to first. That's just straight across the board, 55.8. So if you go to the next slide. So right here is a little bit higher. Okay, so we have 3 arrows. Those arrows are indicating that we have made growth from last year, but we are still not at the state goal. So those interim targets are differentiated for all of the districts, and this is what they're saying will keep us on track for to beat that 2333 for all subgroups. Like I said, we're meeting it as a whole, so we just need to focus. So I'm going to give you an example. So our Black population is a red arrow up. Last year, the 2022-23 data showed that we had 42.2% that were proficient. That was 2 years ago. Last year's data showed that we had 51%. So we made almost a 10% increase in growth, but we're still not to that target. So we need to focus on our Black population, our students with disabilities, and our combined ethnicity. And again, if you look at our areas of focus, So what we're going to talk about there is in math, our foundation students, our L students, special education students. That population, the numbers are not to the interim target yet, but we're seeing a lot of growth in those students. So with the teachers, we're celebrating growth, and then we are in the classrooms, our instructional coach, Mr. Merck, we are in there talking to the teachers, making sure the curriculum is aligned, seeing what we can do to help those students succeed in those areas. But again, with some of those students, that growth is a huge positive, and we want to celebrate that. So that's an area of focus. The other is we implemented Lincoln benchmarks across all of our academic and our special education classes, so that we have a lot of data points that we are able to take a look at and analyze, and really drill down to the students, the growth they're making, and the areas that they need improvement. Some of the things that we are doing to fit in the little box that we have there, this is all reflective in our school improvement plan. We have a very strong co-teaching model for our modified classes. There are very strong co-teaching pairs that are differentiated in the classroom, pulling small groups to have instruction, really meeting the kids at their level and trying to grow them. We offer student support. If you have any student that comes to you and says, I am not getting enough support in math, come bring them to us, because there is before school help, there is after school help, there is lunchtime help, there's bonus block help, and we've even gotten creative. We did the Keystones last week. We pull some of the staff out in every content area, and we run student support sessions. So we invite the entire student population in, specifically those who are not being successful in their classes, and we have teachers working with those students. We're pulling the co-teachers out, and those co-teachers aren't proctoring, they are running student support sessions. So they're our most populated. So that's a huge positive, I think. We're always analyzing data. I mean, you're talking to the math team, so there's never a shortage of that. And we identify our targeted students. We have specific classes that we put them in. So if we have students that either one were not proficient on the Keystone and they were close, we will put them in a course, and we actually use assessments to target the areas that they weren't successful in, and then we teach to that, and then they retest. We also proactively pull some of our students out and say, we're not going to have you test, we're going to put you in a second semester math strategies class, and we're going to, it's not even remediate, we're just going to give you more instruction in some of the areas that we feel you need it. And then they will test later than their peers that they were in class with. You know, they love extra math classes, they're high school kids, right? So that's always a fun sell. We have a good rate for that one for turnover. So, but data analysis, again, I'm very fortunate to work. I was a math teacher, I work with the math department, so there's no shortage of data. And then implementing those tools in order to have those students be successful. So with that, I think, are we on to Mr. Ascona and biology? All right, there you are. All right.
Well, as a biology teacher, we like data too. I won't argue that. Well, as you can see, dark blue across the board in every group, so we're super proud of that. They're just, if you just go through, and it's a lot of similar things we're gonna have a lot of similar things to say. Fortunately, our students are extremely successful. We have great teachers, great students, like Dr. Bakani mentioned. There's certain areas where we haven't met our interim targets. There are actually three areas where, two where we're actually in the right direction. So as far as students with IEPs, we haven't met our interim target. We are in a positive direction. We've increased from last year's number considerably. Also with our Black population, we've increased dramatically from last year. The one group that's deceiving is one or more races. We actually scored pretty high in that, 70%. If you see a downward arrow right here, that's because we've never had data on any two or more races prior to this year. So I'm not sure why they gave us a down arrow, because there's nothing there. It was actually our highest score. So that's where we're at there. So we're hopeful that we can increase that and go towards our goal. Similar support during Keystones. We identify students that need support in their classes and all of their classes. We provide before school help, after school help, bonus block. The one thing that we did identify in biology is we're kind of like, I guess, the stepchild, if you will, because we have, math and science. We had extending learning time for those courses, but not for science class. So what we did a while ago, when we first, when we changed our schedule, was we increased biology to 2 semesters. So it allowed us to have more time in order to teach students, but also in world language and math, it progresses throughout their entire career in school from elementary up. They really only see biology once. See a little bit of life science in middle school, but biology it's kind of like it's an all or nothing type subject matter. So we felt that we needed more time, and also the other thing that we implemented was students that we don't feel are ready, or teachers don't feel are ready for biology in 9th grade, take applied physical science. So they develop skills that are going to teach them how to work with labs and how to understand the scientific method and how to be a better science student. And also gives them another year of maturity, another year of math, another year of language arts, another year of other courses. So by 10th grade, they take biology, and then they're more prepared for it. So it's kind of like a whole program in order to have students perform their best. Also, we wholeheartedly believe in differentiated instruction in science. Again, students that are typically not performing well in biology or not performing well in math and language arts, so they're pulled in so many directions. So you have teachers jockeying for students during bonus blocks, during before school, after school. So we feel in biology, we'd rather take care of that within the classroom with true differentiation. So that's how we have been successful. And I think that's all I have here. So I'm just gonna give some a brief snapshot of our ELL program. We currently have 31 students enrolled in the program. We have 5 students that are new to us and have 0 paperwork, zero testing, so we're closely monitoring them. So out of the 31 students, 8 of them are on consult because they've moved beyond the support needed, and 23 students are in, 19 students are directly in the program. Out of the 19 students, 18 of the students are progressing, on track with WIDA, and 1 student is not meeting the expectations or has not exceeded the expectations yet. So we're 18 out of 19 students are progressing based on our WIDA testing. So the program's going strong. The one thing that I really would like to highlight is our IB program works closely with our ELL program. It helps with the language component or satisfy the language component, and it builds a great relationship between 2 levels of students that can support each other and work with one another. So it's a really nice program that we have that works with the ELL program. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ascona, knew there'd be an IB plug there. That's right. Best meal of the day, IB, Mr. Ascona. The final subject area is literature. Common themes that were shared by Mr. Ascona and Ms. King regarding the growth of our students that either met the threshold or they're well above the threshold for improvement. One area, similar to science, if you take a look at the Future Ready student group breakdown, Nancy. One more slide forward. Thank you. Regarding our, is 2 or more races has the green, which means they did not meet the interim target and they did not demonstrate growth, very similar as they don't have any previous data, insufficient data available. So not sure why they rated us in that way, but always taking a look at our subgroups. We start the year, as I mentioned, looking at every student with a whole spreadsheet, not just math, but English and bio too, across the board with every student that are targeted, test takers, their demographic, how they performed on a previous assessment, previous grade level, to their Linkit assessment, and to the supports that we're providing them. And that's in the hands of our teachers, our PLT teams, as well as our school improvement teams that we're monitoring continuously. In addition to the supports, as you can see, they're common strategies, and we call them norms at this point at Plymouth Whitemarsh. Just to echo what Mike mentioned, Ascona is, you can't put a price tag on high quality instruction or in classrooms consistently, having the instruction aligned with the learning criteria, success criteria. If you walk in any classroom, students love it. They hear something called power slides. They see it in every classroom, which is, why am I learning it? What are the expectations? What's the check-in, check-on, check-out, which is a formative assessment from the teacher's end. So the high-quality instruction is happening within that classroom, in addition to the variety of supports that we're providing before school, during bonus block, during lunchtime, and after school. So we're very pleased with the progress. However, understanding that there's growth that we need to continue to make with our subgroups. If you go to the next slide, Nancy, then we'll close over to Mr. Price with some highlights. The next slide, if you can see it on your screen. Good. It's all good. You probably can see it on theirs. Is really our goal. So it's all data driven, taking a look at not only our student achievement goals, and we can send that thereafter. But one of our goals is growth.
Yes,
Good?
fine on here.
That's fine on there. Okay, so the first one, set to read to you, is student achievement, and it's growth for all of our students, and these are in the hands of the teachers. The connections, I think we're very proud of the culture that we create for our students, safe connections with students, and there's a variety of offerings that we can get involved with. One of our focus areas for many years is stating that positive and safe school culture, and establishing clear expectations so our students can thrive, and ensuring our students are college and career ready, are preparing them for the future based upon our curriculum and our course offerings. I want to turn over to Mr. Price, who's going to go over some highlights that we have in addition to AP Potential, just went out to families.
Yes,
Price.
absolutely. So our last slide is PW Pride, and again, back to looking at all students, equity, access, belonging, and how we can push each student. So before the Chapter 3 through 9 implementation for PDE, saying let's look at college and career readiness for all students, Plymouth Whitemarsh High School went through a 5-block implementation where we added tons of electives with the whole goal of adding courses where students could explore career pathways in our building and at tech school and in other opportunities, which we'll talk about in a second, in preparation for what they may or may not do outside of our walls once they leave us. We're very proud to look at some of our pushes. We have a rigorous course philosophy. We tell students, hey, if you're going to college, you should take one of the most rigorous level classes with us, with our teachers. You've heard about the success here in our schools. Last year, we had 408 students take 606 AP exams. Last year, where all exams taken, 91% scored 3 or better, and 16 National Merit Scholars. This year already in a continuing upward trend, not just for those who are aware about AP classes and what they may mean to your college career, if that is your focus. We're already at 693 enrollments in AP this year, students who are intending to go to college and challenge themselves in our buildings. In regards to the AP courses, we offer 31 AP courses, 5 pre-AP courses. We've received awards in the building due to the credit to our staff and the students challenging themselves for AP Access and AP Honor Roll status. And next year, we are thrilled to welcome one additional AP, which is AP Pre-Calculus, which will be part of the next agenda item as well, also approved in November. We talked about career pathways. We have 11 career pathways here at Plymouth Whitemarsh High School. When you go and look at the course catalog, you'll see a little pinwheel. We determined that if we had 6 or more classes within an area, we could call it our own pathway. It doesn't mean that's the only pathways you could take, but that's what we're able to offer based on all the different content areas. Mr. Ascona mentioned the IB career program, which has 3 distinct fields. And also Tech School has 16 career pathways. Next year they're adding their 17th in barbering. Last but not least, before I push it over to Mr. Bretz, is our dual enrollment group. So this is something we challenged ourselves to look at and said, how can we, again, have students start testing the fields in regards to college exploration? So we've been able to accredit, with the help of our teachers and some local partners, to offer our in-house courses, which we're most proud of, as dual enrollment credits. 223 students last year participated in a dual enrollment class that we offered here on campus within the first semester this year. With some of the additions, we're already over the number of 223. Again, just trying to provide opportunities for students to challenge themselves. In addition to that, we do have a variety of programs. I'm going to pass off to Mr. Press to talk about some clubs and activities.
Good evening, everybody. At the high school, the big thing for us, is a point of pride for us, is to get everyone involved. It's my big thing, is get everybody involved in some way, somehow. We have over 100 clubs and activities, and athletics is a big point of pride for us. We've won multiple championships throughout the years. I think football's won their 4th straight Suburban 1 title. But cheerleading, all the other, non-big publicized sports get their thing. Cheerleading is going on. Now got another bid to states for this year. Our unified bocce team is rolling along, getting ready to go. Flag football in the spring again. Now that becomes a PIAA sport. So we have a lot of things to get kids involved. And one thing that with the flag football with last year is we did not take more than 2 kids from any other spring sport. So that proved that we got another 47 kids involved in a different avenue to get more kids involved in the school. So anytime we see kids in the building, we're like, get involved in a class, in a club, activity, athletics, whatever it may be. And that's our biggest, big thing. And then again, our seniors are getting ready for the senior class trip coming up. And that's a big point of pride for us as well, taking them down there and letting them enjoy that time with their senior class, getting ready for the culmination to walk across that field at the end of the year. Thanks.
Unified bocce's rolling along.
Yes, sir. That was good. Got that. They had the match today at Norristown. Yes.
Did you say there was going to be a goal of a unified sport for every season, potentially? Like, I think you mentioned maybe unified track.
So we were talking about unified track. That was one thing that is with the extracurricular committee right now. So that's a possibility, hopefully, that we can move forward for next year. There is really not one in the fall. It's just really winter and spring, for unified programs.
I just think it's admirable, and I know I'd heard Dr. Cotton mention it before.
Yep.
So I just have a question. With your the resolve room that you guys have this year, have you noticed anything happening with that in terms of good outcomes kind of thing?
So it was actually on my notes, so thank you. That was a nice little op for me. Yes, is Miss Carol King, we call her Miss King.
She's Miss Carol. I know Miss King.
Amazing. Amazing.
Sorry.
She is amazing. She is acclimated herself. We'll be in the cafeteria. She'll walk in and join us and talk with the students every morning when I'm in the hallway. And we're in the hallways. She's greeting students, and she's met with several students as per our student support team and our care team. Thank you so much to the board, Karen, Christian, for the support. She's been an amazing resource for us.
Because and I also want to say too, the middle school gave you guys a good foundation to build on, right? You guys got all the blues, but they did all the hard work before you did.
We go way back.
Which part? But I mean, I know it's great to talk about all the achievements and everything, but I always go back to the kids who, the belonging part of it. So Melissa's here too. So it's great to have all these activities and maybe courses and all these things, but are we really making sure that all the kids feel like they belong, because there's plenty of kids that don't get involved, and maybe there's different reasons that they don't get involved, but I always find that getting involved in something or connecting with somebody is key. And you guys are at the pivotal like ages with the hormones and all the other things that really do affect performance and affect who these kids are as a person. So I just encourage you to look into those kids who aren't, who are sitting by themselves in the lunchroom or really not connecting, to try to, help them, because if we can get them involved, then maybe that'll give them the encouragement that they need to take more AP courses or rigorous courses or whatever. Am I making sense?
For sure.
But I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of that key mental health piece that I don't think we often talk about, but is key for these kids.
And to just piggyback off of that, especially for some board members that maybe, or public that's listening, that don't understand the model at the high school with bonus block put into the day, I think is a really good way to allow kids who might not have time after school for an activity or before school, but to be part of an activity during the actual school day. So I think that model is really important, that lets kids be involved in multiple things at one time, and sort of in the middle of the day encourages them to maybe branch out a little bit more too.
Just piggyback that is 100% one of our goals, and you saw that listed connections, I think, and definitely know that the staff has embraced that as well. If you don't feel connected to your community, your school, you're not going to succeed in the classroom. So that is certainly one of our goals. Our 9th grade team, their counselors with all of our 9th graders, they were surveyed to start the year, what they were interested in, if they're involved. I know they had a mid-year check. Just as they enter, it's important to get them started and involved right away. So I know that our counselors are also acting on that, as well as our bonus block teachers. All of our new students have a Colonial Ambassador program led by students, led by Mr. Blizzard in the counseling department. So we want to ensure that they're feeling welcome to Plymouth White Marsh High School. So they have a peer, a colleague, student leader that they can connect with to acclimate themselves to PW.
Hold
So
on, do you guys have that kind of program too? Maybe you can
for students that are
Without
coming in.
doubt.
new students having like field.
We don't have that in the middle school, but we use our counselors and they.
Right, and it might be a good.
But understood and definitely noted. Thank you.
Thanks.
Do we have data on participation?
Participation for athletics or
clubs
or everything?
All of the above, yeah.
Right. Yep. I can pull that.
We could pull the percentage of the student body that participates in 2 or more activities and at least one. And then the other thing, that I don't wanna get into it now at this hour, but if we could pull the data on the number of service hours that are being completed in the high school. And at the middle school, it's only lower because the students don't drive. But the number of service hours is astounding. And it's in my 20 years in central office, I haven't seen service hours like this. And I've worked in some very good districts, but I've never seen the level of commitment that exists here at Colonial. And that's a tribute to both administrative teams and the teachers that lead those clubs. Anytime we call and say, hey, can we get a group of kids? It's like, yeah, what do you need? And the kids come up with ideas too.
Is that a plug for Monday?
Yeah.
What's that?
Is that a plug for Monday?
Yeah.
But that would be great to have, to Chris's point, so then you can have actionable goals
Sure.
about the proportion of students that may not participate in athletics club, or maybe some service arrangement, right? And really then have actionable goals for the next school year to sort of.
I would say 10 to 15% of the clubs are dedicated to service of the 100 clubs we have, but then another 25, 30%, like the baseball team was for the toy drive this past. When I dropped off the toys, 3 baseball players came to my car and got them out of my car. I'm like, what, are you guys supposed to be in school? They're like, oh, we had a half day. Like, they were there helping out. So that's what they do. It's really impressive. And on top of that, before we move to the next topic, while I'm complimenting everybody, you can never underestimate the importance of visibility in school. And the board walked into the cafeteria, either the high school or the middle school, you'll always see the administrative team out and being present, saying hello to kids. That downtime is so critical. Our security staff, they know the kids' names. You know, Robin, who retired last year, set a high standard for, and Chuck Swan has continued that with his team. In the middle school, you see everybody being engaged all the time. The kids know who their principals are. I saw it when you did the brain game or whatever was going on that day. Like they were dying for their building, their grade level principal to get on that stage. And they own their principals. Like they know who they are right away. And it's great to see in both buildings. And visibility is critical, absolutely critical.
Any other questions from the board about the presentation?
But kudos to you guys for doing all the behind the scenes, like really pulling it and working it and making these kids have a better experience too. So.
And I think too what Dr. Christian said, the visibility during the school day, but also both having had just middle school students and now high school students, and I know it's true at the elementary level also, but the visibility at the kids' extracurricular activities, whether it's at night, after school, but especially on the weekends. And I think that goes really far because our kids see you there. Sometimes your own kids are with you, which I think is great for them too. But it really shows that you're invested in them, not just during the school day, but in everything they're doing outside of their school day too. So thank you guys for that.
And I just, before we go to the next agenda item real quick, I just wanna say, again, thank you for the, intention to the subgroups. And it's really great to see this closing, that you can actually see the numbers starting to very slowly close over time within our subgroups. So I just wanna, again, say thank you, and continue to lift that as we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you for the support.
And again, likewise, thank you to our instructional leaders in the buildings because without all of them, none of this would be possible. So we do appreciate everything you guys do for our learning day in and day out. So the next item is a quick one. It is the program of studies. So this will be. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the program of studies is on there. It does say for the 24-25 school year. That is because it is currently being completed at this time. The only difference that the program of studies will have for next school year is the addition of those three courses, the Spanish for Spanish speakers course, the ELD Horizons course, and the AP3 Calculus course that Mr. Price spoke about a little earlier. So that will be the program of studies for 25-26, and you will see that on as an agenda item for Thursday night. Any questions about the program of studies?
Board policy dictates that the board approves the program studies. Doesn't mean we can't make changes, enhancements, but you know, one, it's your job to oversee. But two, then if you get asked a question about what about this new course or anything like that, you can obviously refer people to administration, to board notes, to anything, and then if there's any updates that you need on any of the courses, we certainly can take care of that throughout the spring. But we need to do it now because they start course subscription probably like soon.
Communication's going out this week to families, and then program planning in 3 weeks.
Yeah, and that jigsaw puzzle starts, like the kids will start registering in February, March, right?
All right, and then our final agenda item, we do have 3 conference requests for you to consider this evening that will be again on the board agenda for Thursday night. The first one is for Beth Lynch. This is for a counselor fly-in, all expenses paid by George Mason University. And then another one for Beth Lynch and Melissa Figueroa Douglas. We had spoken about this before. This would be an HBCU fly-in, and both Melissa and Beth are going, with your approval, are going to go to these universities. They will be going to Clark Atlanta University and Spelman University. Marla left, shout out to Spelman. So we are requesting your consideration for approval. Questions about those 2 conference requests?
Thank you.
All right, back to you, Mr. President.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Any public comment? Did we do that? No?
Currently not this
Good,
time.
okay. All right, seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you everyone for your time and thank you guys. See you next week.
One line.
You get one.
Why not?